How do we know whether or not a guru is genuine or not? Now, it's so difficult to spot an authentic guru in the modern day because the whole spiritual sphere is inundated with so-called gurus. Back in the day, and I'm talking about just a few decades ago, it was much easier to notice an authentic guru because there wasn't that many of them around. And in the modern day, you've got all of these sorts of pop gurus on YouTube who are popular, and you also have this massive influx of these non-dual neo-Advaita teachers who are Westerners mainly, and they're all doing the same thing. They're all parroting the same version of whatever a neo-Advaita person thinks is what a guru should do. Like, for example, they will sit there and they will stare for a long period of time before the satsang, and air quotes, because apparently that is to show that they are the non-dual pure Atman, their pure awareness of Brahman. It's a performance to show the crowd that, look, they are one with God. And it all gets a little childish, if you ask me. And most who have their BS detectors turned on know that a lot of that is really childish because it becomes more about them rather than about the teachings. Now, on my channel, as you know, it's all about the teachings. Who I am is pretty much insignificant. I want you guys to understand these teachings because that's how I've been trained. I've been trained through the traditions, and through the lineage of the traditions, it's important to understand the teachings. Who people are come and go. We all come and go. We will all have our day. But in the modern day, it's become so important for it to be about the guru, not about the teachings, which is very strange. And like I said, with the neo-Advaita people, they all try to pretend to be like Ramana Maharshi, and they'll sit in a chair, they'll put a little blanket over themselves, they might have a little picture of Ramana on the side, and so forth and so on. And so this is supposed to indicate that they are one with Brahman. Whereas you can do it yourself. You really can do it yourself. Humans still have their own idiosyncrasies, so you don't have to all copy each other. And that would be, to me, an indication that you're just copying someone else's version of what they think satsang should be. And so not everyone is Sri Ramana Maharshi, and there was only one Sri Ramana Maharshi, and that's why he's venerated, and that's why he's one of the great gurus. But what I find strange is that in the modern day, people are so eager to be like Ramana in his behavior and in his own idiosyncrasies and in how he presented himself. And so then you see one after the other of these people all pretending to be one person. And sometimes there might be a popular non-dual teacher in the modern day, right, who does these certain things, and then everyone else, particularly the younger crowd, I see a big influx of younger Westerners who are trying to emulate a couple of well-known non-dual neo-Advaita teachers in the modern day. Now, I've got videos on how it is important to follow tradition, and if you're not following the tradition of Vedanta, then you're really just practicing a very dry version of Advaita, in air quotes, which becomes a dry tradition in and of itself, where everyone just sits around staring at each other and there's no flavor. The great gurus and the great sages were definitely not like that. That could only come about from people of other cultures who have a hyper-analytical perspective of the world. So they super analyze what Vedanta is, and they strip it bare, culturally appropriate it, traditionally appropriate it, and half-bake it for it to become what it is. Now, if anyone has done that, could they call themselves a guru? Now, that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. Because when we are thinking about who an authentic guru is, I want to turn to one of the great texts, the Atma Bodha, self-knowledge. Now, this is one of the great Nididhyasana texts, one of my own personal favorite texts. Now, if you said to me, if I could be stranded on a deserted island with one text, well, I'd probably have, as you guys know, a full bag of books. But if you had to put a gun to my head, I would probably say the Atma Bodha would be one of the books high on the list. Such a brilliant text. And I've spoke about this on the channel before. The introduction by Swami Nikhilananda is absolutely breathtaking. If you just had to read one thing in your life, if you read the introduction by Swami Nikhilananda in self-knowledge, then that would be enough. It is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And everyone knows my high opinion of Swami Nikhilananda, one of the great teachers of the 20th century. And so in his introduction, there's a paragraph. He does speak about the real nature of the guru at length, but there is one specific paragraph in self-knowledge that I want to read to you guys for you to contemplate when you come across a so-called teacher and see how they match up to Swami Nikhilananda's words, who was part of the great Advaita Vedanta lineage, mind you, which a lot of these neo-Advaita teachers in the modern day and all of these other type of non-dual teachers try to replicate. But the Advaita Vedanta lineage is the top because that is where non-duality comes from. It comes from Shankara and Gaudapada, which a lot of people don't even know. And so Shankara and Gaudapada decoded the great texts of the Bhagavad Gita, the Brahma Sutras, and the Upanishads, and then so we have this tradition, Advaita Vedanta, right? So non-dual knowledge. And self-knowledge, Atmabodha, is the knowledge of Atman, right? So the knowledge that you are identical with the ultimate reality of Brahman. And so in saying all that, I want to read to you this very important paragraph from Swami Nikhilananda. The ideal guru is, of course, endowed with the direct knowledge of Brahman. He is established in Brahman. Well versed in the scriptures, he can dispel the disciples' doubts and confusion. He is sinless and free from any worldly motive. Calm and self-controlled, he is like a boundless reservoir of compassion. The apparent limitations of the disciple do not prevent the teacher from showering his grace upon him if the disciple approaches him with true humility and eagerness. The guru is often compared to the season of spring, which, of its own accord and without any selfish motive, covers the winter-withered shrubs and trees with leaves and blossoms. Now, this is an on-point perspective of who a guru truly is. Obviously, they need to be a knower of Brahman, right? A knower of Brahman. They have to have the Brahma Jnana, the wisdom of Brahman, and they have to be versed in the Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of Brahman. And so what Swami Nikhilananda says here is that the guru needs to actually be well versed in the scriptures, because none of us are above the great Nididhyasana text, the Prasthana Trihi, and so forth and so on. We are all living under the grace of those teachings and those scriptures, and that's why we even have an interest in non-duality, Advaita. If it wasn't for Shankara, Gaudapada, Vyasa, so forth and so on, none of us would even know about this. It would be such a blind spot. But they set this knowledge in motion thousands of years ago. And so Swami Nikhilananda says first, he has to be established in Brahman, right? He has to have the knowledge of Brahman, and he has to abide by the Brahma Jnana, the wisdom of Brahman that arises from that. And so obviously, as a result of being absorbed in Brahman, one would be well versed in the scriptures. It would just be a byproduct of that. And so because the great guru is well versed in the scriptures, they can teach the disciple and dispel all illusions. Now, one of the misconceptions in the modern day is a lot of people build their idea of a guru around a misunderstanding about Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi, because a lot of people have been told that Ramana Maharshi never said anything, never read anything, and that is all BS, because Ramana was actually well versed in the scriptures. His uncles were Brahmins, you need to remember, right? So he was already around Vedanta as a young boy. And so it's no surprise he became the great guru that he became. And he was so well versed in the scriptures, he actually underwent the painstaking task of extracting the gold from all of the great texts and translating them into Tamil. And so as a result of that, we have the Parayana, right? The Parayana is sold at Ramana Ashram in Tiruvannamalai. I have spoke about Parayana on the channel before. It's one of the greatest books you'll ever buy, because Ramana went through all of the great texts and extracted the most important verses and translated them. And then now we have that translated into English. And, thank God for that, right? And so this misconception that Ramana never read anything, he never spoke, and so forth and so on, is all BS. I actually don't know why people actually propagate this narrative, because it's not true. It's just not true. And so a guru has to be well versed in the scriptures. You see a lot of these fake gurus in the modern day that say that they've never read a book, as if it's like a testament to their enlightenment, but then they start speaking about the scriptures, which is very odd. And so I don't know why they do that personally. I think maybe to gain followers, to maybe fool innocent people into thinking that maybe they are enlightened. They don't need to read the scriptures. They just download it and they just understand it and tell all these stories and so forth and so on. But we know that that's not true. And after all, it's not like you're less enlightened because you read a book. I mean, some of these so-called gurus will condemn reading books, but then you see them playing with their smartphone. Yeah, that's right. And so the guru has to be well versed so they can dispel all illusions for their disciples. And that can only be possible if they are well versed in it and that they abide in Brahman. They have re-identified with the undifferentiated consciousness of Atman, which is Brahman. And so as a result of that, one would obviously be sinless, because a real guru is not motivated by worldly desires. That it just doesn't exist for a real guru. They practice perfect vairagya, right? Dispassion to worldliness. So they practice perfect vairagya. And so they are completely sinless because they are not entangling their mind with the outside world and flowing with this river and that river, and it leads you down over this waterfall and so forth and so on, right? And so they are calm and peaceful, and they have this boundless reservoir of compassion, as Swami Nikhilananda put it. And this boundless reservoir of compassion doesn't mean that it's just this soft compassion. It means that it can be a real compassion as well, because the guru sometimes has to interject in a disciple's illusion and delusions and sometimes be a bit harsh. It's true. It's really true. We live in this day and age where everything is about being PC. Everything is about not staying on anyone's toes. Everyone's so easily offended, even though the one who is offended is the one that has the problem, because they are only words after all. And if you're on the spiritual path, you wouldn't be easily offended, right? So this boundless reservoir of compassion can be very real. And I've seen this personally, where gurus have scolded some disciples for their behavior and also for their lack of respect and their constant engagement in worldly affairs. Obviously, in ancient times, if one was still engaged in worldly affairs, they would not even be granted into the ashram. But in the modern day, someone can just watch a YouTube video and then just go to the ashram and maybe hide their mobile phone and still be engaged with worldly affairs and do all of the pujas in the morning and practice meditation, but by night, you know what's going on, right? And so you can't have it both ways. If you want to dedicate your life to the knowledge of Brahman and you want to walk in the footsteps of the great gurus, then you need to really refrain from a lot of that worldly activity. And one of the last things that Swami Nikhilananda mentions is the idea of grace, right? Kripa in Sanskrit, right? This grace, or even this subtle, silent transmission you receive from the guru, just from being around the guru. You feel more peaceful, you feel more at ease. And a lot of this can be due to the process that you are going through a lot of the time with the guru, with all of your illusions being dispelled and so forth and so on. And you're in a pretty calm environment, possibly like in an ashram or a monastery. So you will feel the grace in a deeper way when you're in those environments, obviously, rather than if you're in a hustling and bustling city and you're sitting at Starbucks, for example. It's not going to be the same. But nevertheless, that grace is still there. And that is there because the great guru themselves have done the work to abide in the Brahman. And so they are almost like a conduit between the ultimate and the manifest world. Now, we all are a conduit. The only difference between a guru and us mere mortals is that they've done the work to re-identify with that undifferentiated state of consciousness and abide in that. That's all that separates you from emulating the great gurus, right? Now, that doesn't mean you go and get your chair and you go and get your microphone and you start giving satsangs. That would be what a guru would definitely not advise. They would want you to remain in bliss, right? Remain in peace. And so that's what the guru would want. There are certain reasons why people become gurus and teachers, and that again is grace itself. That is just a byproduct of the natural divine energy of Brahman. But you don't want to be contrived, and you don't want to plan this out and become a guru, so to speak, and start holding satsangs, which you see in the modern day. A lot of it is all contrived. It didn't happen naturally, as you see with most great gurus. And so towards the end of this paragraph, Swami Nikhilananda said that the guru is like the season of spring, right? So as he said, without any sort of selfish motive, it covers the winter withered shrubs and trees with leaves and blossoms. And so that again comes back to grace, right? There's that feeling of love that you can't explain, right? It's that spring feeling where it's kind of fresh, but at the same time, there's a feeling of love there with no selfish motive at all. And so that ultimately who a guru is. So with everything I've said there from Swami Nikhilananda, and you think about the teachers of the modern day, try and weigh them up to this paragraph, because Swami Nikhilananda himself was a great guru, but he never proclaimed to be a great guru. He came through the lineage of Advaita Vedanta, right? He's part of the Shankara lineage, and he started learning Advaita Vedanta from a kid just naturally, like it wasn't forced upon him. And so he got interested in the Vedanta Society, and then obviously learned from Swami Vivekananda and other Swamis, and became the great teacher he was. And so, as I said, when thinking about if a guru is a guru, come back to this video, read that paragraph, and see if these gurus or teachers measure up to the great Swami Nikhilananda's analysis of who a great guru is. Shanti, shanti, shanti.